what I wished for at the time was really a service that would have kind of laid out my budget, my overall goals for our wedding and what, our date was. And yeah, those key items. And then let pros get in touch with me who were available, who could work within that budget, who, had great ideas and worked with had other vendors that they loved working with and had good experience with, and kind of reach out to me. Then after that, kind of started noodling this idea around and how possible would this be to turn this into a reality? So.
So I have Melissa with us from WedBrilliant. She's on the show today, and we're going to talk about, actually, Melissa, you tell us what we're going to talk about.
Hi, McKenzi. Hi, everyone. I am so thrilled to be here because I was also in your shoes at one point, and it led me to kind of conceive of this idea of WedBrilliant and then eventually launch this startup that is helping connect couples planning their weddings with wedding pros. So can talk a little bit about that and my journey and what led to that.
Yeah, let's start with actually your journey. When did you get married?
Many years ago now, and it's 16. Oh, don't tell my husband. I was questioning that. 16 years ago, and we lived in a different state than we were planning to get married in, and that was really what sparked this. And my mom was so wonderful. We were having it in their backyard in California, but we weren't living anywhere close. And she was being great about reaching out to vendors and trying to find the right DJ and the right florist. And I so appreciate her help. But it was so hard because I wasn't able to connect with anybody directly, even just in the initial narrow it down process, which obviously you have to do in order to get to that person that you ultimately want to work, or the team you want to work with. And so even finding a planner, I was like, all right, mom, thanks. You can pick the best person.
Right.
And what I wished for at the time was really a service that would have kind of laid out my budget, my overall goals for our wedding and what, our date was. And yeah, those key items. And then let pros get in touch with me who were available, who could work within that budget, who, had great ideas and worked with had other vendors that they loved working with and had good experience with, and kind of reach out to me. I mean, we're all overwhelmed when we're planning our wedding. There's so much information. And even if you mentally start doing it years potentially before you get engaged, which happened for me, it was still oh no, there's so much to do. So yeah, that's where I came up with the idea. And I was just, if there was a way to put out these key things and then have people let me know if they could work with me, then that narrows down that field of people that I could potentially work with and really decide who we wanted to engage. So I mean, for the purposes of our wedding, it turned out great. My mom was really solely in charge, and she did fantastic, and probably should take on a second career as a wedding planner. But then after that, kind of started noodling this idea around and how possible would this be to turn this into a reality? So.
Okay, cool. So I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm just going to ask it anyway. What is the difference between the service that you offer and the website than something like The Knot or Wedding Wire?
Yeah, good question. And we get that a lot. And obviously The Knot and Wedding Wire and those types of services do offer a lot to couples, but we take it one step further in that instead of reaching out to one particular wedding pro and saying, hey, are you available on this date? And, what's your pricing? And, those key questions, we're kind of putting it out broadly and soliciting proposals or bids from a handful or more.
Got it. So correct me if I'm wrong, but is it safe to say that people need to kind of know their budget and people bid, or walk us through it?
Generally speaking, we have some couples who come on and they're like, here's our overarching wedding budget. We need a wedding planner who's going to work within that budget and make everything happen. So the full service, right? And so we have those. And then we also have couples who maybe aren't fully sure how much they want to spend on a DJ or a florist, but think it's maybe in this range. they'll put that information out, and florists in the geographic region who happen to be free on that date see all of it, no matter the budget that's been put out by the couple.
Okay.
Yeah. And then they can say, gosh, like, I feel like maybe I will let them know that I could realistically do this with these flowers that are out of season. And so it's gonna be a little more expensive or whatever. But the budget's going to be, 50% more. And maybe the couple's willing to spend that. And half of it, as we know, is just like learning. Oh,
right.
That's really what that costs. Okay.
That's what I was actually going to say. Like, some of the biggest struggles I've seen couples go through is actually deciding like how much things cost. They have no idea until you start learning. But this is so interesting in that basically vendors are putting bids to couples. Like,
yes.
Right. It's the opposite.
It's like a reverse. Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. That's fantastic. And I love like kind of this learning element of, this is kind of our budget. And then, the vendors can be honest. And if nobody replies, honestly, your budget's too little or.
Right. And you have the chance, you can repost. So it's free for couples to use WedBrilliant.
Okay.
There's a membership fee for our wedding pros, but for couples, it's free. So there's no downside if you don't get bids or proposals because your budget for a DJ is $200 and nobody says that they're free. You can post it again and say, okay, wait, I kind of moved things around and we really want the best DJ and we're going to allocate 2,000 or whatever.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, okay, you're getting some bids and proposals. But yeah, it's really designed to also be a way for couples to learn this is what it costs in order to get X, Y, or Z. It is a big kind of education component when you're planning a wedding. And I was unfamiliar with the cost of things. This was 16 years ago. I am now probably more familiar than I have ever been because of WedBrilliant, but it's changing all the time.
Especially right now. Yes. I mean, with certain things, supply issues.
Yeah. And the boom seasonal. And people's calendars are like booked out. And so they're charging a premium maybe for a venue on a Saturday or, Friday night. It's all of a sudden, much higher than it maybe would have been before. So we encourage all of our wedding vendors when they're submitting a bid to a couple to like put what they would actually charge for what the couple has laid out. And that's why we give a space for a couple to really say, here are my goals. Here's what I really want to achieve. Is it, hydrangeas in November, which are clearly out of season? Okay, well, we can make hydrangeas in November happen, but it's going to be this much. It's not going to be what you suggested your budget was. So yeah, all of our vendors are kind of like empowered to say, we can do this. We can make this happen. Here's the budget. If you want to really work within your budget, which you've laid out, then here's how we can tweak and like kind of meet your needs and provide like an alternate solution maybe. And the couple maybe says, great. Yeah, that works perfectly. We can do that instead. So
cool. Well, when did you start WedBrilliant? And let's actually spell it. So, cause I feel like I say like WedBrilliant.
I know.
It's WedBrilliant.com.
Yes. So Wed, short for wedding, and then brilliant. I say brilliant all the time. And so when I was launching it, somebody was like, just call it WedBrilliant. It's like your go-to word. You use brilliant all the time. Like if a good cake comes out of the oven, I'm like, brilliant.
That's awesome.
So yes, WedBrilliant. I believe, so it was a process to go through to kind of really take it from the idea into reality, but it was launched in 2014. Okay. So we've been around for a while, gone through a couple of different iterations and grown. We have, I think, about 4,000 wedding pros around the country right now in every state. So, if you're anywhere in the US, theoretically, there is a wedding vendor who can meet your needs, but we're trying to grow that every day and really expand to new pros who are also looking to find, couples and reach out about their services. So yeah, it's just a constant work in progress, but I love it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's talk about how we can help couples plan their wedding and maybe create less stress. How can this, in your experience, help them, or just your general ideas and thoughts around that?
Well, I mean, that's probably one of the key things and the main driver for me starting this, because it's going to be stressful no matter what, right? But if we can eliminate some of the additional, especially on the front end, just you're overwhelmed with options and ideas and everybody weighing in with, you should try this and you should meet so-and-so. And so the idea that you can kind of tailor that experience and whittle it down a little bit to just focus on hiring the person that's best for you for a particular part of your wedding, ideally would be relieving a ton of stress off of you. So maybe you're still meeting 3 people in person, but instead of like the 15 DJs, you've narrowed it down. You know that those 3 people are available on your wedding date and able to meet your budget. And now you just want to see if you have a good rapport with them when you get coffee together. So it's just kind of like taking out the overwhelm, I guess, of like, oh my gosh, so much to do, and just making it more feasible. But that's the key thing. And then when couples do get bids from vendors, they live on the couple's dashboard. So couples can review those and go back and say, okay, so-and-so said they could do our wedding cake for, $1,500, and so-and-so said $750, but it's only 2 tiers. And so they can kind of compare and contrast, and it's all there. Neat. Yeah. And it doesn't go away. So we know everybody's busy and they're probably working at the same time, and they've got the dog and all the things. And so it's just there. The couple is sitting on the couch at the end of the day and is like, okay, let's just check what's been going on and who could potentially support us on that particular aspect. And there's no contract that you sign on WedBrilliant. You're not locked into anything. If you accept a bid from a vendor, it's more like, hey, I want to meet you. Let's chat more. I know you're available. Let's get a FaceTime scheduled. So
all the services and all the contractual and payments actually happen through your vendor. Like,
we're not trying to lock.
Source.
Correct. We consider ourselves like a matchmaking service. Yeah. So we're going to pair you with a couple of different options. And then if you're thrilled with one of those, then you two are going to hammer that out and make those plans moving forward, sign the contract, pay the deposit, whatever it might be. But that's specifically left off of WedBrilliant because we want to give couples the opportunity. Not everything can be done online. You may need to get on the phone and none of it's blind. So when you see a bid come through as a couple from, say, a cake baker, it's not hidden. You know exactly who it is. You can go do your research. You can find out more information. So it's designed, again, to your point about removing some of the stress out of wedding planning. It's designed to just make it as easy as possible, not add a layer of frustration and stress onto the process.
Yeah. So how soon after engagement, or how far in advance, rather, maybe is a better question, do people start planning their wedding on WedBrilliant?
So typically I would say the bulk of our couples join very shortly after becoming engaged, just because they're trying to get a sense of where their budget can, how their budget can work, and educate themselves. And then get a sense of who's out there, what kind of vendors are they still looking for, and just kind of start that ball rolling. We do have a number of couples, however, who, and this is where we're helpful as well, their hair and makeup person fell through a month before the wedding. And they come to WedBrilliant and they're like, I need hair and makeup for me and my 3 bridesmaids in a month. Like, can anybody help me? And so we're designed to be a matchmaker really at any stage of that process. But I would say the bulk are starting earlier, just to kind of like, again, narrow down the field so that then they can go off and start planning with their DJ, with their florist, with their planner, with the venue, whoever they have decided to work with.
Right. Do you find that most of the people that use the service are staying local to where they're having their wedding, or is it mostly destination, or what are you finding?
Well, the last 2 years have hit us hard, as it has for much of the wedding industry, but it's been entirely local, obviously. Now we are seeing people branch out a little bit more, and that's where WedBrilliant comes in handy too. And that's, for me, that was my goal, because I was in a different state. I couldn't just go meet with somebody for coffee because I wasn't there. And my mom was that person. But we're finding a lot of people who are out of state, planning a wedding in a different state, and are just trying to like, hey, I'm coming to town to do a whole bunch of planning over one weekend. I'm going to really narrow it down. I need to meet with you two and you two and you two, and I'm going to make all of my decisions. So we're seeing a lot more of that now with couples who are on WedBrilliant now, but it can be used anyway. Aside from, we don't connect with international vendors, but anywhere within the US.
Nice. Okay. But international couples could use WedBrilliant if they're getting married in the United States.
Yes. Yeah,
Awesome.
because again, there's no cost to couples. So it's
Right.
not like we're trying to exchange currency or anything
Right,
here.
right.
It's just we're connecting you with US based wedding pros.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Cool. And then what do you find is the most popular vendor on your site? Like, is it venues? This might be irrelevant. I'm just actually,
good question.
I'm
Curious.
just curious. Yeah.
So planners are very big. Photography, and a lot of couples come on pretty early on in the engagement because they're looking for an engagement photographer who's also then going to be able to photograph their wedding. So do both. And then we also have a lot of, I just mentioned hair and makeup. There are a lot of people who are looking for hair and makeup artists and just want to find out kind of like, do you fit in my budget? And then can we get a trial? I'm trying to think. I think planners, photography, those are the big ones. DJs, actually a big one as well. So we have a lot of couples looking for venues too, but I think that once couples kind of select a planner to work with, some of those other different, flows out of that. Yeah.
Right. It seems like to me that a lot of people either select their venue first and find their vendors or select their planner first. And that helps them select some of those options. Yeah. So it's my understanding that this isn't necessarily a wedding planning service. So you still want to have a planner, most likely. Yes. But it's like helping you pair with a planner or with a photographer. But I'm sure there's still like lots of awesome DIY components as well.
100%. And that's also, I think, where at every budget, like you could come in and say, I have $150,000 for this wedding and I just need somebody to like spend it for me. And okay, we'll pair you with a great planner for that. Right. But yeah, it could be that your budget is a tenth of that and you want to do a lot of it yourself. And so it's a way of saying, this really is my budget or ish around, a couple thousand, maybe plus or minus. And what can I get for that? And then what does that leave for me to do? And, also, of course, there are wedding planners who really can support couples with that DIY component. Like, hey, you can actually manage that yourself. Don't worry. Hire me for the day of, you talk to your florist, you do this, this, and this. So there is a way to kind of meet couples where they are, is kind of what we say is like, if you have an unlimited budget, great. You can still use WedBrilliant and find the vendors that are perfect for you. If you don't, and you're more budget conscious, you should be, this is a huge expense and you don't want to waste all that money and then start your life with nothing. So I'm a big proponent of like being budget conscious when planning a wedding and finding those things that you can do yourself. WedBrilliant can help you do that, even if it's just pairing yourself up with vendors that are in line with your budget.
Right. Actually, you just said something that's really important to me, like one of my little core values in my wedding business and the budget, like the debt that can sometimes come with weddings is not necessarily something that I agree with unless the couple wants to do it. I just don't feel people should be pressured into going into debt just to create this like wedding experience that maybe they don't even care about, like really living authentically with yourself and like deciding if that's the way you really want to go. Would you mind expanding on kind of your thoughts and feelings on that? I sensed there was like a little something there actually. So
no, I completely agree with you. And I think that's my sentiment. Exactly. There's a lot of pressure and there's so much out there right now that it's like, Pinterest and Instagram, everybody is like sharing everything. So it's very easy to see this fabulous $200,000 wedding with all the things and, 1 million flowers. But then realistically, like, is that something that you look back on in 20 years and go, that was the best way I could spend that money? Maybe yes. And if not, then I applaud you and find the best way to spend that. I'm a huge proponent of whether it's DIY or just finding the best way to make your money work for you. And partly that's what WedBrilliant's trying to do and trying to help couples with. And again, it doesn't matter if your budget's huge or your budget's make it count and make it work for you, because once you get married, you're going to be tackling that debt and or save the money and like put it towards a house fund or, your honeymoon or whatever else might be important to you at that stage in your relationship and your life. So it sounds like we're speaking the same language. I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
There's just pressure.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of pressure, and I don't think a lot of wedding pros talk about it. I mean, we're in an industry, and obviously as professionals in an industry, you want to make a living. And I'm not saying anybody's doing anything wrong. That's not where I'm getting at all.
Yeah.
It's just that as a consumer, you don't need to feel pressure to have something that doesn't truly speak to you. Yeah, just be true to yourself when you're kind of doing these services and finding people that make sense for you.
Completely agree. And, you know, actually people ask me this a lot, and you may get this as well. They say, if you were to spend the money in one way, like what would be the splurge? And I would say the planner and the photographer, because you're going to look back on those photos, you know, X number of years later, and that's going to be what triggers those happy memories. You're not going to remember what the bouquets on the tables look like. You're not going to remember whether it was top shelf alcohol or, you know, like slightly lower shelf alcohol served. I mean, and your guests surely will not remember. So I think it's just like kind of keeping that in perspective too. Make it the best day possible. Again, my wedding was in my parents' backyard. It was very like casual, and I had the best time. It was not fancy, but it was perfect. And my memories and the photos that I can go back and look at are what like trigger all those happy memories. Yeah. So I think that's when I talk to people, I'm like, you know, splurge a little bit for a great photographer and an excellent planner who can really help you.
That will create
take whatever budget
stress
you're working with. And yes, it takes it off of your shoulders 100%.
Right. I can say that I'm a wedding photographer and my biggest splurge, and this could be partially because I have relationships with a lot of photographers, so it might be a little bit biased. So I might have gotten some good friends to help me out with those services, for instance. But I actually remember my biggest, like, number one thing that I wanted to have at my wedding reception was I wanted a live band. And so that's actually where I splurged the most. Yeah. So kind of funny, right? But I just wanted this different. But yeah, I mean, I'm a wedding photographer. So yeah. But I think that also people should know, if you're just in the beginning stages of planning your wedding, your venue and your food is going to be the bulk of your expense. So, you know, 100%. Making that selection, and then like the planner, the photographer, the DJ, bar service,
everything flows out of there.
Flows out of there. So, and honestly, I think that this could go on a whole other podcast episode, I realize, but I think that I'm seeing a trend with folks kind of being a bit more sustainable or eco or intentional about like even favors, stuff like that. Like, don't stress, man. Like, don't stress about that kind of stuff.
No,
in my opinion.
I totally agree. Actually, for our wedding, again, my parents' backyard, but they live kind of near this lagoon and the ocean. And so what we did was, my name's Melissa, my husband's Matt. So we got a bunch of M&Ms, but in our,
I'm an M&M.
We got M&Ms. We got M&Ms in our wedding colors, because you can order specially colored M&Ms, which are like cheap. So we ordered those M&M, and then we made a big bulk donation on behalf of all of our guests to the Lagoon Foundation, and then put a little note attached to these M&Ms, which cost nothing, but people like were happy to munch on, and just let them know that we made a donation in their name, in their honor, to this foundation, which was important to us. And that was our wedding favor. I mean, and people were thrilled. They didn't have stuff that they had to take home and be like, dude, what do I do with this?
Obligated to keep a koozie for years, you know, something like that.
They ate the M&Ms and tossed the rest of it, and knew that we had like put the money that we would have put into favors to something that was important to us. I think you're right. And you can do something different with every wedding and every different budget, but just like you said, there are options out there.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think that we actually touched on so many awesome points. Let's actually wrap up this episode with kind of give us a summary of WedBrilliant again, and just the benefits of it real quick. Your top 3.
Yeah. Okay. Top 3. It is WedBrilliant's free for couples to use, to sign up and join and use. And it is super easy. It's a matter of posting your budget, your wedding date, and kind of what your vision is, and seeing if vendors submit bids and proposals that are kind of in line with what you're looking for. And then third, just selecting the vendor you want to work with. We have reviews on our website for a lot of the vendors. You can do some of your research there. but none of it's blind. So you can also go do your research elsewhere. And, really the idea is just to simplify this process. It's overwhelming. It's stressful. If we can take a little bit of that off, then we're happy.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Melissa. We'll be in touch.
It was my pleasure. Sounds good.